You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.
So now, without further ado, we have Kristen Tracy and Thomas Sadoski. Kristen is a poet and acclaimed author of more than a dozen novels for young readers. Her poems have been published in Poetry, Prairie Schooner, and the Threepenny Review, among other magazines. She lives in LA with her husband and son. And Tommy, you have a very long bio, so I'm going to cut it down. He's acted in a variety of television, film, and Broadway and Off-Broadway shows, including Newsroom, the Law and Order SVU, my personal fave, John Wick 2, Other Desert Cities, among many, many others. He's a board member of the charity organization Inara and board member Emeritus. I don't think I've ever said that word out loud. Emeritus of Refugees International. And they're here to talk about Haphazard, which Claudia Rankine says the poems in Kristen Tracy's searing debut, Haphazard, are like films you see in your dreams. They feel palpably continuous, while their jump cuts and leaps catapult you through a wild narrative terrain. These poems live on the bright edge where realism and absurdity meet. Tracy, I'm going to talk about you like you're not here. Tracy's prodigious talents craft a world that once entered you never wish to return from. Here they both are.
Thank you. Hi, Kristen.
Hi. This is my first event for the book, so.
This is your first event for the book. You're feeling a little bit anxious about it, yeah?
You know, I spent 20 years putting this book into the world, and so this is a big moment for me.
Can you talk to me about what it was that 20 years?
Yes.
Why?
So I grew up in a small Mormon farming community of about 800 people outside of Yellowstone Park, and I think there was no real expectation for me to ever do anything. And a few years ago, I was walking with my dad in San Francisco, and I'm like, when I was a kid, did you ever look at me and think what I was gonna be? And he's like, yeah, a wife, a mother, Mormon. And I was like, oh, well, and I was like, none of those things. And I was like, oh, okay, Dad. So when I went to college, I only applied to one school, and it was Loyola Marymount University. And my parents thought I'd go to this Mormon community college near our house, and I just didn't apply there. And so nobody helped me go to college. I flew there by myself. The woman who sat next to me on the plane took me. Because she was like, how are you getting to school? And I was like, oh, my mom says there's a shuttle. And she's like, yeah, there's no shuttle. And so they helped me move in. So I got to college, and poetry was something I was good at. And so I'm like, well, I'll do this. And I did a degree in it. I taught high school for a little while, and then I went and got a master's. And then I just was like, oh yeah, I'm going to just be a poet. And then I went on to do my PhD, and I really liked it. But at a point, I did look around, and the poets were really sad. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should not be a poet. And so I started writing fiction, and I got an agent really quickly, and I started writing children's books. And they're super funny, and I had an audience, and it was great. But I kept writing poetry, just thinking the book was going to come. And I was a finalist for the Yale Young Poet Prize and the Walt Whitman, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to win probably next year. And it just 20 years later, it takes a long time. And my friends are like, well, you could have gotten a book published sooner, but I really don't know how. It was so it was just a lot of hours.
It should be noted that you did, in fact, win the Emily Dickinson Prize for First Book of Poetry.
Yeah.
Congratulations. So the 2 decades of work was certainly worth the wait.
It was amazing. That was an amazing moment.
It is an incredible book of poetry.
Thank you so much.
It is. We were talking earlier about fiction and poetry and our own sort of personal tastes and everything, and I was saying to you that it is a breath of fresh air because it is one of those sort of pieces that cuts just. I think we were talking about poetry as a precision weapon.
Yeah.
And it really, your work really, truly, truly is. In the 20 years that it took you from sitting down and maybe considering writing a book of poetry to actually getting a book of poetry published, how did you grow as a poet?
I was somebody who was restore the
How
gardens
did
there.
you end up becoming a volunteer gardener on Alcatraz?
So I came from Michigan, and in Michigan,
Oh, that makes sense.
I had bought a house, and the people I bought it from had been master gardeners, and I knew I was going to sell the house and not live there forever, probably like in 3 or 4 years. And so I'm like, well, I can't let all these plantings die. And so I like just started befriending all these people who were gardeners who would like help me like keep all the plantings alive. And then I moved to San Francisco, and I was in an apartment, and I realized like I kind of missed touching the earth. And so at first I thought I would just volunteer in Golden Gate Park, but I was looking online for opportunities, and they talked about the Alcatraz one, and they said, you get a free weekly boat trip and a special hat. And I was like, I'm in! And so I went, and they just really liked me, which was good, because I did not know anything about gardening at Alcatraz. It was really hard, actually.
Is there is there something specific about gardening on Alcatraz that makes it different than?
So
Aside from the
So it was
obvious.
a historic recovery effort. And so when Robert Kennedy closed the prison down, they had all of these gardens, and they just for 20 years went wild. And then a woman gathered all these photographs of these military gardens and prisoners' gardens and said, these are the flowers that were here. Let's put it all back. And so a crew of people, volunteers, went and hacked out all the blackberry bushes, got them off the island, and found all the old stores. We found a rose that is extinct in the world, and we brought it back to Wales, where it's from. And so it was like this recovery effort. And so it's doing things like that, I think, helped my observation level. I was a big fan of Louise Gluck and her book, The Wild Iris. And so putting myself in situations where I could learn new stuff. And then I always, I would go and study with people I really liked. And so like Claudia Rankine is somebody I really wanted to study with. And so I did. And
What did you take away?
well, so this is like such a terrible thing to tell people. But she really liked me, and she became my best friend. So, like, she's like, you can show me your manuscript, like, we travel together, so it's really awesome. But she taught me, she reads a poem harder than anybody. And she's just really good at understanding what the truth and motivation is behind a poem. And just sitting and reading with people like that, and seeing them read all these other poems and gaining that insight, you become a better reader.
Right.
And so that was something that was really useful to me.
And do you think that because by becoming a better reader of poetry, it has made you more aware of how you express in terms of poetry?
It's made me a better reviser.
You're better.
So I'll generate stuff, and I can go back and look at it with different eyes. Like I feel like I can almost put Claudia's eyes on it.
Right.
And that is just an amazing thing to be able to do. And so I always tell my students, like, if there's people out there you really want to study with, you should go study with them, because they're incredibly. But every now and again, there's like a loser person you like, and that sucks, because then you go and study with them, and it's not awesome. You know, and they're just like drunk, and they don't give you any good feedback, and you know.
Come hang out in my world sometime.
Yeah. But I do, like, so this is one thing I tell people, like, I'm a writer, I don't really like to, you know, I'm a mole person, but I know to be successful, I have to leave the house. And so, like, going and doing the Alcatraz thing, going and working with Claudia, for me, like, that's leaving the house. And those are very important things to do, I think, in perfecting the art and, like, getting there with it.
In honor of Claudia and of what has been an up and down week, but that has some pretty significant, wonderful underpinnings in it, I'm wondering if you would do us a favor, and could you read us an official Lady Bible?
Oh yeah, that's surprisingly. You like that one? Not surprising you like that one, but yeah, I love that poem.
Yeah.
So I when I left Idaho to break from Mormonism, I moved to Vermont. And I became an aerobics instructor, and
One cult to another.
And a waitress in an Italian restaurant, and I taught college. I was very busy when I was in Vermont, but I really feel like working in that restaurant taught me so much about the world. And so a lot of my poems, well, a few of the poems in the book are about working in that restaurant. And so this is called Unofficial Lady Bible. So many minds dwell on what happens between the sheets. I wish I'd been prepared. Dough rising in bread pans. The fry cook, busy in the walk-in, pants down, hips furiously pumping against the pastry chef, pressed against a mayonnaise barrel. Didn't they have spouses, children, shame? The real shock, it wasn't just them. They only began the parade. Adulterers, wrongdoers, creeps. How long could a girl like me work in a place like that and keep her eyes closed? My role models had been delivered from the Bible. I was handed a child's oven, an apron, lipstick. At 7, I could press a perfect pie crust with my thumb. Ta-da! Decades passed before I would open the door to that walk-in and arrive as somebody other than myself. Yes, my busy mind opened it all the time, adding variety. I mean, how could Tina commit so much betrayal? Her body, its own Bible, tight-assed and aging, beholden only to her own climb and joy. It took me years to admire exactly what she'd done.
Thank you. You teach.
I teach, yeah.
I'm thinking of your poem Tell.
Yeah.
When I ask this question, what has teaching taught you?
So, teaching is hard because one thing when you're teaching a poetry workshop, what happens is it almost always turns into a little bit of therapy as well, because people are putting things out there and they're exposing like tremendous vulnerabilities about themselves. They're telling you about things they'd never tell anyone, and then suddenly you're workshopping these moments and these experiences. And so it's taught me to be more human in a way. And when these things arrive, even if I can see pathways to improvement, a lot of times it's just about them getting it out, and then we can work on revision on the next piece. And so it's taught me a lot of patience with that, because I'm somebody who's like, yeah, let's compress it, let's fix it, let's get rid of the lines that aren't working. But in the poem Tell, there was this one student who brought in a poem about his sister's death. And it was a very, it's really hard when that happens. And the first few times it does happen when they bring something so personal and you're just caught off guard. And so, yeah.
In what way, as a self-declared mole person, have you learned to be more human through teaching? Poetry specifically, not just the act of teaching, because we all know that so that sort of idea cracks you open, but specifically teaching poetry.
No, I've been personally flattered by people's willingness to be that vulnerable, because I know at those ages I was not turning in poems like that. And so there's a certain bravery that, and I feel like particularly like in like a generation like underneath me, that there are people who are braver than I am. And to see them and to see the risks they're willing to take emotionally by talking about the things they want to talk about, I'm just really humbled and impressed by it, because I don't know that I was telling those things or talking about those things.
Do you think that's a demand of the times?
I don't know. I'm happy about it, but I also know that I grew up in such a conservative, like, closed place that talking about anything felt very bold to me.
Sure.
My people are going to drink wine in the poem, So there was that.
Have you said you learned to become a better editor.
Yes.
Have you left anything raw from the 20 years that appears in this book?
So I feel like you can actually edit your way into more raw by cutting things, because I think a lot of times what happens is you say something and then you duplicate yourself. And so one of the things that I've gotten very good at is realizing when I'm doing that. And so by pulling some of those things away and putting less down, I feel like you are making it more raw. And I think that that's just a trick you learn over time.
Do you ever worry about sort of slicing the onion too thin?
I had a ruthless reader once. She was a Stegner Fellow at Stanford, and she published some of my poems in this journal, and I just, by chance, so I seek out people I like. So I was having lunch with Tobias Wolff, and she saw me and figured out who I was, and she was just like, we should just exchange manuscripts. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I was like so cautious with like how I edited her, and like I gave it back to her, and then she gave me mine back, and I felt like she'd like taken out like half of the stuff, and I was like, what's that, But then I really like thought about why she was asking me to cut things, and that was like a really hard lesson for me. It was was to realize, like, just because it works doesn't mean you need it. And so she really drastically, and I did go back and put things in after she took it out, but just having somebody that that loves you and loves your work go in and drastically edit you is fascinating and something that I hope everyone can experience, because it's a really good lesson.
And this is probably shows my ignorance in terms of writing.
Wow.
By asking this, and I don't mean to push you on it.
Okay.
But it is something that just it's a question that it keeps on sort of bouncing around in my head, and it is that at a certain point is the fear that you lose the poetry of the poetry by making it too efficient.
There's always an underlying musicality to what I'm writing. And that's just like having an ear that I worked on.
And this is not to say that this has
Yeah.
ever happened to you, and I'm
No,
not
and
suggesting
so
that exists in your book at all. So it's not some passive aggressive criticism.
It would feel like there was a hole if I started to edit away too much, because there's a music I'd be losing.
Got it.
And so there's a rhythm so ingrained that's helping me generate what I'm doing, that if I went back and tried to pull away too much of it, it would feel like if you've lost a tooth and then you just can't stop touching it, it would feel like that to me.
Right.
And so I don't, and there have been times I've taken something out of a poem and it's like, it bugged me. And it bugged me to the point where it goes back in. And even in a poem here, like for years, I'd taken these 2 lines out, and then like I sent it to Grey Wolf, and I'm like, I kind of want to put these 2 lines back in. And they're like, yeah.
Which poem was that?
That was Assignment, write a poem about an animal.
Love that poem. Would you read that for us?
It's like a setup.
It really wasn't, though.
Assignment, write a poem about an animal. No, I told John, you may not write a poem about your will. If not my will, he said, how about my soul? I said no. He wrote about a male impala dominating his female herd. Oh, I knew I could never trust him. The antelope was not simply an antelope. Its eyes, of course, were the same gray as John's, had the same number of violet flecks. And unlike most impalas, this one wasn't leaping through Africa. Rather, it was living on the outskirts of a park in John's hometown. 25 years and still shooting BBs into songbirds and digging through their bodies to get his BBs back. Bragging about the women he's conquered and the adventurous ways he took them. He wrote the poems I didn't want to read. In his last, he gathered images from LA streets, described the La Brea tar pits off of Wilshire Boulevard, the curve of the mastodon's neck, his already sunken hind legs and tail. John wasn't sure how so many got trapped. He wondered what kind of urge led them into this bubbling mess. In conclusion, he used himself to understand. Twice, rushing to buy condoms and cigarettes, he ran across a parking lot and stepped into puddles of oil and water, ruining his tidy socks. They were mostly young males, he wrote. I guess it happens. Which, in the end, reminded me of my own soul, bright and impulsive with an important date to keep. She, too, could overlook the dark and liquid road.
Thank you. Which 2 lines?
The dark and liquid road lines. I put
At
those
the
back
end?
in. Yeah, those weren't there for years. My friend cut. She was a cutter.
She really was.
She was. But I love her,
Sure, yeah, no, of course. I mean,
But it is. It makes you question, like, what was really important to you about that poem. What did you want it to do?
yeah. I'm fascinated that somebody would cut those 2 lines.
She thought the poem should end on John. And to me, the poem was really about me.
Well, it starts with you. Well, it starts with John, right?
Yeah.
But it starts with
I
John in
overtake
reference
him.
to you, and then but like,
Yeah.
oh, that's so interesting. Okay.
So that reminds me of the worst advice anyone ever gave me in poetry, and it was a professor, and I was turning in these quirky poems and my poems, and she's like, I really think you ought to try to write poems where you're not in them, because there's just too many I's. You're just making the I too central to these poems. And in the end, I did like do some observational stuff, and it was okay. But then I just kind of realized, like, you know, people give advice that they wish other people would give to them. And, like, she was kind of boring. And, like, her poems, like, had a lot of eyes in them. And, like, not much was happening, you know? And I'm like, I bet, like, she just, like, gave that to me because, like, maybe someone had given that to her, you know? But so you do have to be careful about, like, you know, how much you let land.
I'm really glad you put those lines with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I did it the last, like, moment. Like, it was a copy. Like, it was going. You think we could add these? So yeah.
I'm really, really glad you did. In that poem, you mentioned something. You talked as somebody who grew up in the country. Mm-hmm. I recognize some of that sort of that country behavior.
Yeah.
And you've also mentioned growing up in a small Mormon community.
Yeah.
Now you and your husband Brian, both have left.
Yeah.
The faith.
Mm-hmm.
We know, we can imagine, those of us who haven't, or those of us who have know, those of us who haven't can imagine what it costs to do something like that. What do you gain?
Happiness. So I have told Brian that we should get together and write a collection of essays that are kind of like a how-to guide on how to, like, leave a faith system and then, like, be happy on the other side. Because once I was sort of tricked into going to this party that was, like, former Mormons, and, like, they were so bitter, like, you know, and just drinking and talking about Mormonism, and it felt a lot like hanging out with Mormons, except for the drinking part. And I just remember, like, you've got to get on the other side of it. And, like, there's a tremendous freedom. And, like, because you've been constrained for so long, you know what the freedom feels like. You know, like, if you're not somewhere for 3 hours every Sunday to suddenly, like, have your Sunday, like, that's a gift, you know? Like, that's a game. And there's a part of me, I was afraid when I left Mormonism, like, I'm going to miss it. I'm going to go back, and everyone's going to be like, you know, oh, we need to come back. And, like, I left, and I just remember, like, it just got better and better, and I was just happy and, like, happier. And then I'm like, oh my God, like, what if I get really old and decide I want it? Like, I get a head injury, and then, like, finally, like, I just kind of realized, like, I'm never going to go back. Like, you know, like, it just wasn't a good fit for me. So.
What has it given you as an artist? Because there are artists who thrive in those conditions.
Yeah. You know, it's given me attention. Like, there's always going to be a natural tension between where I came from and who I am now. Like, there's always going to be that. And it also gave me something to push back on to, like, find my own identity, you know, because it's like, I can remember when I got to Vermont, like, I thought it was just a coincidence. Like, I'm going to go get my poem read. I'm going to get an astrologer. Like, Terry Tempest Williams is like, you should get an astrologer. I'm like, yeah, I should. And I realized, like, of course I'm creating these things because I just removed, like, my entire, like life view. Like, you know, everything I just ripped out of my life. I had no path anymore. And so that's, like, that gap there, trying to, like, build something really quickly. Like, that was rough. But, you know, work.
Neil LaBute is somebody that we discussed. Mm-hmm. He's a collaborator of mine and a friend of mine, and he has mentioned leaving the church. Has provided him almost an instant identity in a different way as being contrite.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, it certainly has set his work up.
Yeah.
In that regard, he was happy to sort of grab that mantle and run with it. Do you feel like that pushback, that tension?
You know, I hadn't, but suddenly it's like I'm getting, like, emails, like, from church stuff, and it's like, we want to nominate you for, like, Mormon something. We understand you're no longer identifying as Mormon. And I'm like, yeah, how did you even get this email? Like, you know? So there's that element, you know. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, the book is so new, and for so long I did children's books, and I never touched Mormonism in them because I didn't want that to overtake any of the stuff I was doing or be a distraction. But now that the book's out, I think that's going to be different. So, and I'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next moderator I have in Portland is currently a Mormon. And so, like, I have no idea what's going to happen.
Oh my God, I really want to see that.
Yeah. No, they put me on a panel about belief. which I don't know why they did that, because I just don't.
What do you believe in?
I'm gonna have to think about that before the panel.
I think you're probably gonna have to.
Yeah.
If you're sitting on a panel about belief and you're not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the whole point.
I don't know. I just when cornered like that, I tend to just talk about animals. So that might work.
You in the great tradition of Jim Harrison write and use animals in an extraordinary way in your work, and it's nature appears. You almost and forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but from my perspective, it feels what it feels like is that you almost at times perceive humanity as playing by rules in a world in which nothing else has agreed to play by those same rules. And you almost have a sort of compassion for these bumbling, two-legged creatures that are sort of staggering through the world, playing by a different set of rules than everything else. And this fascination that you have with animals in your work, where does it come from? I mean, other than obviously growing up in the country, we know how important they are in terms of your day-to-day life and what an oversized role they take in sometimes. But in terms of your work,
so I studied with Mary Ruffel early on, and she's a poet. She's great, and she's like, you write about animals a lot, and I'm like, everybody writes about animals. She's like, no, you write about animals a lot, and that was like my first window into the fact that I was more curious about them maybe than other people. And so I thought about it a lot. And there was this moment when I was a child, and I had like a rough grandpa, and he had a farm, and he made an arrangement with a beekeeper where he could keep his bee boxes in his cow pastures for free honey. And then my grandpa would be like, we're gonna move the cows in the field, can Chrissy come help? And my dad would always be like, oh yeah, she wants to. And so I would go, I'd be 7, and I'd be herding these cows in between these bee boxes, and I was just terrified. I was afraid of the cows, I was afraid of the bees, and they would usually have me stand to block gates so that the cows would go through, and the cows would just run towards me, and I would always let them through because they weren't afraid of me. And so after that would happen every time, I'd be like, maybe I should hold a stick, and they're like, you can't hold a stick, you'll hurt the cows. And but I can just remember watching the cows and having them size me up and just realizing they just had a completely different set of issues than I did, and that caught my attention and my interest. They had a whole different set of needs, a whole different set of wants. They were gonna, they did not care that I was gonna get in trouble for letting them through the gate. They were gonna do what they were gonna do. And that with the bees, I just, it really plus I grew up outside of Yellowstone Park where we constantly were getting reports about the bear attacks and maulings and all the tourists getting gored by buffalo. And if you don't know that when you're a child, you just think that's how that's happening.
Right.
Yeah, of course.
Another
Biker got taken by mountain lions. What happened?
Sure.
And then you get older and you realize, that's not everybody's news cycle. You don't really, but I know so much about bear safety just because I grew up believing I was going to meet my grizzly,
Right. Yeah, the most of people don't sort of grow up watching ravens pick over a carcass on the side of the road with great regularity. Yeah. Would you read Local Hazard?
Oh, sure. So I'm really happy that my book has a bear on the cover because bears are really big to me. And I make a joke about meeting my grizzly, but talk to me sometime. I'll tell you because I did in Alaska. I came across a grizzly all by myself.
So we're going to talk about that next.
So local hazards. Outside Yellowstone, I see them, these bears lumbering like fathers through backyards, ravenous for whatever we seal inside our trash. Do not feed the bears, the signs say. Even this big, they are animals, my mother warns, holding her hands out the distance of a loaf of bread. Beneath that fluff, they are killing machines, adds my father, raising his arms, curving his fingers to produce mock paws. Season after season they carry on, moist snouts, sharp claws, hind flanks glistening under moon and sun. I am too young to deal with them, led by hunger to my doorstep, to my dreams. They wildly arrive, almost every day, and I close my eyes, starving in my own ways, breadcrumbs in my pockets, trout in the refrigerator, the deep smell of myself on my fingertips. Unwitting hazards, do not come close. Despite your puffed cheeks, playful gallop, the lovable way you corral your young, I must keep my distance. No, I cannot give you what you want.
Thank you.
This is the most clapping I've had in decades.
Get used to it. So, go on. You were mentioning your grizzly.
Okay, so I'll tell this story. So I went to Alaska because I was researching a teen novel there. And before I left, I was in San Francisco, and so this kind of sets the stage. I was like, I do not have enough bug spray for this trip. So I went to Walgreens, and as I was going to Walgreens, I saw this van getting a ticket, and I'm like, oh, poor guy, like, I hate tickets, yeah. Go in, and I'm like, and it was a lot of tickets on the guy's van. And as I get my bug spray, and I come out, and suddenly it's like there's crime scene tape everywhere. Like, I'm in the crime scene tape, you know? And so I just say really loud, like, what's going on? And the guy's like, yeah, tow truck came to take the van, and there was a body in there. And I'm like, oh my God. And I look over, and I see a body. And I take my bug spray, run home. I have a flight in 3 hours. I get on the plane. I'm flying. And halfway there, the pilot comes on, and he's like, do we have a doctor on board? We are experiencing a medical emergency at the back of the plane. And I'm 2 rows from the back. And so I look, and this woman is in complete distress. It was so traumatic. They get her up, they make her walk the entire rest of the flight, even into first class and back. It was it's bad. We land, and so my anxiety meter is just high, And my friend, I'm staying at his house, and he's like, you should just go for a walk tomorrow. I'm at work. I'm right next to this forest. It's great. There's all these trails. There's a map. I'll leave you downstairs. I get up. I go downstairs. There's a giant bell. I put it on. I take the map. I go, I start walking, I hear this munching sound, I'm like, what's that? And then it's I realize it's a moose, and so I call my friend who's a park ranger in Maine, and I'm like, there's a moose on my path, and I'm clapping my hands trying to get it going, it won't move. He's like, yeah, the only time I've ever seen a moose charge is when a man clapped at it. So I was like, just let the moose go, you want different things. And so I waited, the moose left, I started a hike, I had my map, I was trying to read it against this post, and this couple comes by with their dog, and I'm like, can you recommend a hike in this area? And he's like, can I recommend one? It's a loop hike, it's scenic, it's gorgeous, you'll love it. I'm like, great. He's like, just go that way. You're going to cross a little river. Make sure that you don't get any water on you. There's a lot of salmon. You don't want any scent on you. Cross that. There's going to be a military base. Trespass into the military base. You'll go not very far. Off to the left, there'll be a path. Take it. Gorgeous. Scenic loop. Right back. You're gorgeous. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I get to the little river. I cross it. I don't get wet. I get to the military base. I'm like, yeah, I'll trespass. I'm trespassing. Another woman with her dogs is coming by, and I'm like, excuse me, I'm looking for it. She's like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I have never left the main trail, which I should have taken as a sign, I shouldn't be leaving the main trail. Did not. Found the path, took it, I'm walking, it's gorgeous, the grass is getting taller and taller, and I'm like, oh my God, this is pretty, And then I'm wondering when it's going to loop back, and it's not looping back, and then there's another path. I'm like, do I take that? I'm not sure. I go to the next one. As I'm standing there deciding what to do, I hear this blood-curdling scream that makes all the hair stand up on me, and I hear a whirring sound, and I look, and there's a bicycle just tearing down the path, coming towards me. So I step into the grass, and she's screaming, you need to go faster! And she's gone. And I'm like, well, was she talking to me? I wasn't even going. And then, I hear another whirring sound, and I look, and there's this younger, chubbier, version of her coming along, and, she's got snot coming out of her face, and she's crying, she's uncontrollably crying. And she's screaming, I'm going as fast as I can! And then she's gone. And I'm like, oh, they're probably getting chased by something. I don't know what to do. And so then I'm like, I know what to do. I'm going to back up to that first path, and I'm going to walk just enough to see what it is so that I'm not terrified, and then I'll go back, and I'll go back. So then I go to the first path, and I start walking. As I'm walking, I see something that looks like an elk to me. And it's lumbering, and then it stands up, and it puffs its little mouth. And I'm like, oh my God, it's a grizzly bear. And I'm like, I cover my bells, and I back up as slowly as I can. And I get back to the path, and then I just basically run home. And then my friend comes home, and I'm like, yeah, like I saw a bear. And he's like, where did you see a bear? And I'm like, well, across this river, across past the military base, I went left. And he's like, you went left? Why would you go left into there? And it turns out, like, there were 54 tagged grizzly bears in the park he sent me to walk in, and an unknown amount of black bears. They don't even tag them. And I'm like, why would you even send me there, like, without bear spray? He's like, well, we were out of bear spray. And I'm like, oh, put that next to the note with the bell. Like, you know. So, yeah. So that's my bear story. But, you know. People pointed out I did not follow probably, like, the best, like, bear safety behavior on my trip to Alaska, and I agree.
That's not even the thing that I'm sort of taken with. I mean, sure, I suppose that's probably true too, but Kristen, you left the Mormon church for a pretty extraordinary life of adventure. I mean,
my husband has accused me of living a life of interconnected short stories, and I kind of have to agree with him. Like, so I'll tell you guys one more quick anecdote. So my son is in kindergarten, and they invited me to go and, like, speak and be the author at his school. And I'm like, yeah, I'll go and do a presentation in my son's kindergarten. Great. So I go, and I'm like 10 minutes into this author presentation, and, like, the intercom monitor, the intercom goes off, and they're like, we are in a hard lockdown. Teachers, assume hard lockdown procedures. And, like, the kids, like, just cramp her under the desk and pull the chairs in around them, and she starts closing the blinds, and I realize I am in an active shooter drill in a kindergarten classroom. And it's like, I didn't know what to do, and, like, I kind of get under the tables with them, but they were, like, super chatty, and they, like, kept asking me author questions, and the teacher had to, like, crawl over and shush us, and then it's like you're just dark in there, and the kindergartners didn't understand what was happening, but, like, I did, and I'm so traumatized, and the sheriff department's being sent around to, like, pull on the doors, like, because they're the ones there doing the drill, so you just hear people walking the halls, pulling to make sure the doors are locked, and it was just awful. And then, like, when it was done, I had to finish my author presentation. And it's like I come home and I am just, like, traumatized. And my husband's all chipper. And he's like, how was it? How did it go? And I'm like, worst experience of my life. And he looked, I told him what happened. He's like, Kristen, you know, out of everyone I know, for anyone to be in an active shooter drill in a kindergarten classroom, I would guess it would be you, actually. I would guess you. So, yeah. So there's that.
thank you so much. I'm wondering, as we wrap up, if you would do us a favor and read 2 poems for us, just to sort of close out.
Okay.
And then we'll turn it over to the audience to ask just a couple of quick questions of you if they want. But would you read for us Vermont Collision?
Okay. So that's drop.
Yeah.
Vermont Collision. If you want to see a boy lose his dream, kill his mother with a train. It happened. I was in Vermont serving a baked whitefish. Her son was bussing a table. She was on her way to buy an ice cream cone. A whistle blew. She got off the tracks, but the side of the train still clipped her soft body, took it hundreds of feet until she fell into a meadow. There were so many warnings. That night he dropped half the things I asked him to hold. There was no moon. It was too dark. We were too happy. We might have been laughing as she was being hit.
And would you read Haphazard?
Haphazard. And so I should say, like, in a braggy way, because I should say it.
You should.
It just appeared in New Yorker like 2 days ago, so I'm super excited about it. And it's surprising when that happens, like, how many people, like, email you to talk about that. And even, like, a random man from Alabama who now wants to do my taxes for some reason. Haphazard. They can put a girl on the moon right now, I suppose. The details wouldn't be too hard to crack. Dangers here, perils there. It'll go how it goes. Earth faces venoms, disease, foes, and woes. Free of that jeopardy, she won't rocket back. If you put the right girl on the moon, I suppose. Some might worry alone, she'll face lunar lows. Does a girl who lacks parties turn blue in pitch black? Dangers here, perils there. It'll go how it goes. Like Buzz, Neil, and other above-average Joes, she'll travel in space boots and wield a screwjack. if we put our best girl on the moon, I suppose. We'll blast her above every bloom of dog rose. Let her farewell our bright spots along with our rack. Dangers here, perils there. Who will own how this goes? Prepared for the darkness and cut off from schmoes. Whole girl haphazard. On a zodiac track, we'll put that girl right on the moon, I suppose. Endangered, imperiled, and watch how it goes.
Thank you. I can't believe this is your first time doing this.
Oh,
You're a natural.
you're very kind.
We're going to open it up for a couple of quick questions if anybody has any. No?
My dad has a question. What's the zodiac cat in haphazard? The zodiac track.
The zodiac track.
No, but we had a long discussion about you today.
So I feel like that means something very specific to me, but I feel like it probably means other things to other people and their level of degree of astronomy. So to me, it's the star path that she's literally beyond, like that zodiac path.
That's what I told him my father.
Thank you, Adria. Adria is like one of my dearest friends, so she didn't ask me anything.
Any other questions?
You seem to have a confidence in your own work, which is really refreshing. I feel like sometimes, especially with poets, I find people sort of almost like embarrassed to be sharing their art, and I'm wondering if you've always felt that way about, or always presented that way, whether or not you actually.
I'm gonna sound so cocky right now. So everybody has their down days, like where you feel like, wow, I've just written garbage my whole life. I can't believe it. But for the most part, like I feel like I like writing poems, and I always felt like in the workshops, like I was writing good poems. I always felt like, oh, this is a keeper, and so I did feel that way. But I also like I really think hard about what I want to write about. Like I feel like some people will be walking and be like, that was a dog. I have a poem today. I'm gonna write about that dog. Like, and that was never me. Like I was like super aggressive in graduate school, like trying to like write poems that I thought would like endure. I saved all my drafts. I don't know why. My husband has told me that it's fine, that we have all these bins of them. So there is like I feel, and maybe it's because I was leaving religion and it was a thing I had. Like, that I because in a way I probably thought at the time part of it was for my art. Like I'm leaving it for my art. So like it had to matter to me. Like I had to believe I was good at it, or else like what did I have, My son doesn't know the word Mormon. He calls them the Normans. And I love that. He's 5. Like he'll like every now and then just have to be like, "Does your family want you to be a Norman again?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they did."
Does anyone else have anything else to ask? Kristen, how are you?
Hi, Kristen. So you are a successful novelist in various realms and now a published amazing poet. With these amazing anecdotes that I know that you have and you've shared with people tonight, would you ever share those in either an autobiographical or just possibly inspired by a real life short story collection?
So I don't think of myself as like somebody who'd write a memoir. Like naturally, like I just because I like I don't know like. But recently I was at a party, it was like Yale people, I was visiting Claudia and she tricked me, she's like, let's go to Maine and do a retreat, and then I got to New Haven and she's like, let's just stay here and write, and I'm like, what? So then we did that, and I was at this party and this man wanted to talk to me, and he just like, he assumed like I just kind of was nobody, like all these people like were Yale professors you could recognize, and so he just started talking to me about this memoir he was working on, which like sent me into like a panic. And so I found he said to me, I told him an anecdote too, and he's like, I bet you could write a memoir. And like, I was so like offended by that. Like, there was like a part of me that's like, yeah, you watch, Bob. I probably will. So I do think that like I want to write the collection of short stories about leaving Mormonism with Brian. Like, I think that'd be super fun, and how much of the anecdotes would make it in. but I'm also like super nervous about offending people. And like I just remember there was this nonfiction writer at BYU who like came to talk to us, and she's like, and she actually was a fiction writer, and she wanted to write nonfiction. She's like, but I can never write nonfiction because I can never say the words, "My sister is fat," and she is fat, and if she ever read that, it would hurt too many people. And so, like, there's this fear I have, like, oh yeah, my sister's not fat, but like, could I say my sister is fat? Like, you know, and I don't know, like, I wouldn't want to hurt anybody. And so I totally understand why some people wait until like their parents are dead before they do stuff like that, because like it just like takes away some of that stress of them reading it.
Well, maybe you'll write a TV show about.
So yeah, so no, Adria is like, she's great, and I met her at screenplay camp, and she tricked me too, and she said, she's like, let's write like a funny like porn thing, and I'm like, what? Yeah, sure. It'll be like Weeds but with porn. But then like when push came to shove, and I told her like, give me your porn menu, she's like, yeah, let's not do that. So we wrote something else.
Any other questions? Thank you guys very, very much for coming this evening. Kristen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Skylight Books author reading series. Don't forget, you can listen to this and all of our other great podcasts at skylightbooks.com. Thanks again for stopping by, and we hope to see you soon.